Welcome back to Tell Us, the Purpose Podcast. This is the 6th episode, and today I'm joined by professional footballer Nathan Thompson. In this episode, we dive into what it really takes to build a professional career in football, the discipline, the sacrifices, the pressure, and the mindset behind staying grounded in a sport that constantly tests you. We'll go through the academy stages, how to handle setbacks, and how to know whether or not your friends are pushing you forward or holding you back. If that sounds interesting, stick around, and I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Nathan, only 0.5% of youth players make it to professional football, 4% at the teenage level, 6% across the whole academy level. You're one person out of the small percentage who has not only made it, but you've had a long career too. Tell us about it. What was it like as a dream as a kid? What's the hard work been like? And what's it like now for you, looking back?
It was always something that I was very passionate about as a child. I was very fortunate. I had a younger brother who was good at football as well and has made it in the same way. So we were very competitive as kids, and it probably facilitated us being on that journey together in many ways. But don't get me wrong, football is a roller coaster. There's only a short amount of highs, and they're few and far between, and the lows, they can hit you. So it has been tough, but it's a journey that I've absolutely loved, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of. So I'm very pleased to get to this stage of my career, still play and live out well, for me, it was a childhood dream.
At what moment did you realise football was for you?
Probably when we were living in Germany, and I played for a local team. It was sort of an army team. My dad was in the army, and we moved about quite a bit as children. We settled in Germany, and I played for that local sort of British team as such. And then was scouted to play for a team called Paderborn, who have actually gone on and played in the Bundesliga since. And at that point, would have been sort of 7 or 8 years old, being selected to be me and another friend being the only sort of British lads in that setup was eye-opening, and it maybe showed me at that point that there was an opportunity here to maybe explore. I then returned back to the UK at 12, and within about 4 months of being back in the UK, I was then scouted for Swindon. Went on trial for 2 weeks. And
what age is this, sorry?
Sorry, that was 12.
12 years old.
Yeah, so I was scouted within, as I say, quite a short period of time, being back in the UK. And then moved up, played for Swindon right through then until 26 years old. So yeah, from that sort of 12, it's even younger than that, when you're getting selected for those sort of setups as such, you always know that maybe you've got something, but I don't think you truly realise maybe how good you can be until later on, maybe sort of 16, 17, you're getting offered those pro contracts.
So that stat, 0.5% of youth players, I guess you could consider 12 as probably youth, not teenager yet, is quite low. 0.5% is almost nothing. Did you notice a difference in culture between just playing football as a hobby with, like you said, you played with your brother quite a lot from a young age. When you joined the academy, was it a different style of football?
Not really. I don't think at that age, kids kind of just do their own thing. There's maybe not the same structure. Don't get me wrong, you're playing with better players, kids that are more gifted and able to do things that you probably weren't seeing at the local level. But I wouldn't say it was a different style of play as such. We would just kind of go out there and you were freestyle, and it was you may be working with better coaches that have worked with kids that have gone and made it as a pro, so they had experiences, they understood what maybe it took to but I look back on it, and as you say, I played with players that were much better than me, that haven't gone and had the career that I've had. And first, I am fortunate, but it comes back to that sort of level of sacrifice that you're prepared to make. Come a weekend, you're not going out, you know what's required, you need to eat right, and all the sort of cliche things that are sort of mentioned, but that's probably what gives you that longevity in the game, because even when you sign a pro contract, everyone says that's when the hard work starts. But you're going from contract to contract in the lower leagues, that can be difficult. And as I say, I've been very fortunate to have 17 years within it.
And you've been to multiple clubs as well. You started off at Swindon, and then you went to, which is it, Portsmouth you went to after that, and then what was the team after that?
Peterborough.
Peterborough
and
and
Stevenage, now MK.
Now MK Dons. So you made it pro at 19 years old. Can you remember what that moment was like for you when you actually made it pro?
It was funny because in my youth team, I wasn't really playing as much, and we had an FA Youth Cup run, and lads that were my age were doing really well, and other clubs were looking at them, and those same lads were offered pro contracts at sort of 17 years old. And I remember coming home that night and sort of saying to mum and dad, like, I don't think this is it. I've got 7 lads that have been offered a pro contract, and I'm one of the probably 2 or 3 that haven't been. So I'm not entirely sure this is going to be the sort of path for me. And my dad, as I say, army background, sort of tough mentality. He's certainly not giving up that easy, and kind of pushed me and encouraged me to get back on it. And thankfully, the next 18 months of that scholarship, I really was able to kick on. And I think within a year or two, those same lads that signed pro contracts had left the club, and I was the only one remaining. So it naturally, football has its way of finding its level, and if you're prepared to commit and, let's say, show that level of discipline that's required, then ultimately, hopefully, you'll get those opportunities.
You mentioned that your dad has the mindset of, don't quit yet, keep going. There's a Bible verse actually that says the darkest time of night comes just before dawn, and it's kind of the notion that when you are just about to get what you've always wanted, you quit. And many people do quit, but you sounds like you kept going and you made it. What was that like for you, having that mindset?
Again, it's ingrained. I was very fortunate to have the people around me that I did. My mum and dad were hard workers. My mum had a gleaning business, and me and brother both grew up going to work with her at times. And so that hard work was ingrained inside us. And as I say, squaddy army background, you just knew that sort of mentality that was required. And ultimately, when you look at the fact, you read off those stats, the fact that both me and my brother have made it and had that sort of long career in the game, I am a firm believer that it comes from that sort of upbringing. So, yeah, you're right. There's a huge amount of setbacks, and ultimately I signed a pro contract, but and that was the high. But those, as I mentioned at the start of this, that sort of roller coaster journey, those highs are few and far between, and there's certainly been a lot more lows. And if we didn't have that ingrained mentality, then I do think that there'd be times where you would have thrown the towel in.
What's the biggest moment where you felt like throwing the towel in?
It's probably injury. It's strange. I left Portsmouth, and it wasn't a case of wanting to throw the towel in, but I was promised by my agent at the time that I was going to go to a championship club. There was teams that were sort of after me, and we had conversations and were very keen to take me. So I left the club, and at the time the manager came out and said that I would refuse to sign a contract. And it's a very passionate fan base at Portsmouth, so they felt as though I was dissing the club, and I didn't want to play for them. And the fan base turned quite quickly on me, and going into a team that you'd put your body on the line for and stuff, it was hard to hear. And then to see that not come for that championship not come to fruition, I think it doubled down on that. It was uncomfortable. I ended up signing for Peterborough, who were in the same league, and effectively, in my mind, and that's no disrespect to Peterborough, but we'd gone from 20,000 fans every week at Portsmouth to now 9,000 at Peterborough. In my mind, I thought it was a step backwards, or at least a sideward step, and that was disappointing, frustrating. And then living away from home and not seeing mum, dad, and family for weeks on end, it was a tough one to take, and it take a little bit of adjustment around that. But I think injuries are something that probably don't get spoken about enough. The mental challenges of being in a gym when everybody else goes out to warm up or to have their training session, and you do that week on week. I mean, signing here within 2 weeks, 2 games of being at the club, I did my PCL and was out for 4 months. It's setbacks like that you, throughout your journey, you realise that it really is a case of never too high and never too low. You can't be, because unfortunately you end up going down a sort of dark path in that sense.
Milton Keynes Stadium, MK Don Stadium, is quite big. You mentioned that the most packed it's been is 30,000, you said, with that Liverpool game. How do you deal with the pressure of all these fans around you? Like, they're chanting whatever, they're in a good mood, bad mood. Do you have to just cut out the noise and just keep focused?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't here at the club when they got that sort of attendance. But when I was at Portsmouth, we played a Checker Trade final game against Sunderland, 88,000 fans, and it was incredible atmosphere and something I look back on with the biggest smile on my face. I regularly show the kids just to relive that moment. But it is very much a case of that. It's just blocking it all out and not being able to get caught up in the atmosphere, because it can choke you up. It can give you jelly legs. There's a nervousness about you that if you're tuned in and dialed into all that sort of noise that's around you, I think it can really put you off your game. It's something that as players you do become quite good at. And it's strange actually, because the amount of times I've spoken to boys about stepping out their comfort zone, and they're quite comfortable going out and playing in those atmospheres. And yet, if you ask them to go and deliver a presentation in front of 20 lads, it's a completely different ball game, and it makes them feel really uncomfortable. So as players, you do get used to that sort of environment and atmosphere, but it is certainly a technique in being able to shut the noise out.
What's been your proudest moment as a professional footballer?
Again, we talk about those highs and lows. I remember when I was at Swindon, leading the club out, a club that I'd been at 14 years at the time, and to walk them out at Wembley in the playoff final, a season that was ultimately, it wasn't successful, but it felt like it had been successful. We had a young group of lads and a complete new philosophy of football, and we took this group on a journey, and to be able to lead that group out was incredible. But then the flip side of that, 6 minutes later, I was being stretchered off because I tore my hamstring. That's the sort of roller coaster that I talk about. It's just highs 1 minute and lows the next, and it can just be so quickly that changes. So that has been difficult.
Do you feel like you're running a risk with your health every time you play?
I wouldn't say no, because I don't want to say that it's a case of life and death, and people, it can get sort of taken out of context. Of course, muscle injuries are part and parcel of football, and ultimately that can have impacts on mental health and stuff like that. But we're in a fortunate position as players. We do a job that we love and we get paid handsomely for it. So I certainly wouldn't say that we're compromising our health in that sense. But naturally, you do understand the risks when you go on the pitch.
What's the competitiveness like, especially in your younger years, when you first joined the academy and stuff? You mentioned that you started playing with players who are higher skill, maybe a little bit older, a little bit stronger. You have to get up to speed a lot quicker. Do you think that had an impact on you as a player?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that competition, the level of competition never changes, whether you're 13, 14, sort of trying to get that scholarship contract, or you're my age now and you've got younger players that are trying to replace you. There's always a level of competition in football, and it's why it's such an in-demand sport. It is difficult, but you get used to it. And I think as people, we're competitive nature, and that's what enables us to get to this point. But yeah, I think naturally the setbacks you have throughout your career, the players you play against, the players you learn from, all shape the player that you become.
You mentioned that you have kids yourself. What's one lesson that you've taken from football that you'd like to give to them?
I don't know if I think it goes back to that groundedness, the fact that 1 minute you can be the best player ever, and you have a fantastic game on a Saturday, you score goals or whatnot, and the fans are all over social media praising you. 72 hours later, you can have a stinker of a game, and those same fans are very quick to flip the switch. It's a fickle industry, and they can be chastising you in many ways. So whether it's football, whatever sort of path they go down in life, I say sort of find a middle ground, be content in that space, and don't get too high on your own supply in many ways. You never know what's around the corner. But I think it's something that I try and teach the kids. I know that it's difficult at the age they're at now to really maybe understand that, but social media has certainly changed the way that footballers operate now. You have to be a lot more sort of, let's say, closed, because you just, as soon as you put yourself out there, you open yourself up to criticism, and I probably got to an age now where I'm looking at what comes next, and I have to become a little bit more vocal in it. But that's probably only because I've got to this stage of my career, and maybe I'm not as focused on what those fans have to say anymore. They're not kind of having such an impact.
How do you think social media has changed the game?
Just because every single person has an opinion and they can express that, and that opinion you can read quite clearly. It can come up on your feed. I remember when I left Portsmouth, and as I said earlier on, it's the fans had turned in many ways, and it was a couple of days before my brother's wedding, and no, actually 24 hours before my brother's wedding, we'd gone for a sort of meal, the family, and I'd come off social media because the abuse had got to a stage where I didn't want to engage with it anymore, and they found a way to my wife, and they sort of sent messages to my wife that I won't repeat, just because they were really quite spiteful, nasty, and it just shows you that you're never quite safe in that sense. You're always open to that abuse in many ways. So don't get me wrong, it certainly has its benefits, but at the same time, you do have to tread carefully around it at the same time.
I like what you said about, the kind of contentness lesson that you want to pass on to your children. I've seen a clip of Robert De Niro. I don't know what film it's from, or it might have been in an interview, but he says, when things are going well from you, just be calm. Yeah. Be calm. Because like you said, all it takes is 72 hours or a matter of minutes in a game for you to be stretched off with your hamstring. How important do you think that is just in general in life? Not just football. You want to teach that to your kids, of course, but you can get job promotions or you could lose your job. How important do you think that
it's critical? It is, whether that's being too high or too low. I mean, the sort of line of work that I'll go into next will be full of rejections. And I guess it's the same as football, constantly people saying, no, you're not good enough and this sort of thing. And it's how you adapt to that, how you're able to take that on the chin and move forward. If you build a resilience to it, you're able to keep pushing forward and ultimately, eventually being successful. But if you're one that takes that sort of criticism to heart or gets too high, I think the swings in emotions becomes difficult to handle.
How did the self-comparison to others, when others were getting picked but not yourself, how did that feel?
That was tough. I think in football, probably in life, and again, it goes back to social media, you're constantly comparing yourself, thinking that people who are further down the road, you sort of competing against, and it's difficult to sort of remain and focused on your own sort of position and mindset in that sense. But again, it goes back to what I was saying, the people you have around you. If you've got good influences, people that can sort of advise, I think that's critical for being able to stay focused. And
for you, this was your family, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really
what would you say to the person who maybe doesn't quite have that in their immediate circle, like, in their family or their close friends, but they have the dreams, they have the aspirations, and they know where they want to get, but the people around them are too negative? What would you say to that person?
Seek them out. I think you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you're surrounded by people that are providing bad energy, then you have to remove yourself from that situation, because ultimately you just become another product of that environment. I am fortunate and I've had that background, but if people are not in that position, then seek out mentors, people that can question you when you feel that is needed, and you're not just surrounded by yes men and that push you outside your comfort zone. I'm the biggest advocate for this, because I believe that's where you grow the most. To be able to face the fear and do it anyway, it's critical to getting on in life. And yeah, for those that are not in that sort of environment, I think you have to try and seek it where you can.
Would you say it's important that your friends are also honest with you too? Not, as you said, not just yes men, but when you're slacking or you're not doing what you could be doing, you're not doing the things that could make you at your fullest potential. How important is that honesty?
It's huge. And at times that's difficult from a friendship to be able to do that. So that's why I say seek out those people that may be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of you, because you look up to them and you then mirror and try and copy and imitate the sort of actions that are providing. If they're good people, if they're people that are on your same journey, then I think it really sort of enables you to step into that space. And I think that's critical if you're really gonna grow and achieve.
A lot of people suffer, or not suffer, but struggle with the breaking apart from the old pack, the friends that you get along with now, but they're not kind of who you want to be. They're not at the same mindset, not at the same level, not the same way of thinking. And they struggle with breaking away with them friends because they've been friends with them for so long, for example. When all the doubt comes from them because those friends are trying to keep you at their level, they're saying, you say to them, I'm not drinking at this party tonight. Mm-hmm. They go, oh, you're boring.
Yeah,
oh, come on, have some fun with us. No, I just don't want to drink. How would you advise someone to kind of put a tough shell on and not be susceptible to that sort of manipulation?
It's difficult, and especially if you're of a impressionable disposition. If you surrounded by big energy and big characters and that, it is difficult to say no to them. But that's where the onus falls on you to accept responsibility. You're part of the journey that you want to go on, and if those people that you're surrounded by we sort of call it a crab mentality, pulling the crab back into the jar as such, then ultimately they're holding you from achieving and reaching your dreams. If you're going to ever achieve anything, you have to, and I know it is a lot easier said than done. It's easy for me to say from this position, you have to sort of move on from those sorts of people. But if ultimately that's where you want to get to, then you have to question those that are in your network and if they're holding you back.
It sounds to me like you were almost guided towards being a pro footballer from a young age. You said you played with your brother and all this sorts of thing. What does purpose mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think over the years that purpose changes. I think as a youngster, you have a dream and you put that dream on as your North Star, as people refer to it as. Ultimately, that was me being a professional footballer and reaching sort of the highest level I could. And then I had children, and I think that completely changed the sort of the mission in many ways, because everything I do now is with them at the forefront. Decisions I make, I assess the impact that's having on the children. I spend 4 nights a week away from home. Now that plays on my mind daily, because when I get up at 5 o'clock and that's a Thursday morning and I'm not seeing them until Sunday morning, it's a tough one to swallow. So you're intentional with the time you spend with them, but the decisions you make, whether that's on the pitch or off it, have them at the forefront of your sort of what you're looking to do.
Did you have in mind as you got older and older and older, if I don't know if you had in mind you wanted kids or not, but did you have in mind that one day I could be a dad and what I'm learning right now will be passed on to them?
Yeah, probably because I had such a strong father figure, and the impact that my dad had on me, I was always keen to replicate for my children. I've alluded to it many times throughout this, but I was fortunate to have that, because I know not everyone's blessed with those sort of that opportunity. But my dad taught me a lot, and I think mentality was front and center of that, and it's something that I'm desperately keen to ingrain on my kids.
Tell us a bit about your dad.
He's an incredible man. Grew up in London, and parents from Barbados, come across in the Windrush generation, and joined the army at 18 years old. And it would have been difficult for a black soldier to join the army. Certainly weren't ever. The army wouldn't have wanted a black soldier to really succeed. So that sort of mentality was ingrained from it at a young age for him. But yeah, he was strong character, disciplinarian. He wouldn't ever allow. He sort of ingrained in me and my brother that manners were first and foremost, and that's something that, again, we try to part onto our children. But he just led by example. When he was in a room, he could hold the room. He would rise and fall to whoever was in it. He was an incredible person, and we lost my dad, unfortunately, September 2024, and it's a big hole. I speak to the kids, and you see the impact it's had on my children. But yeah, he certainly left us with a huge amount of legacy, and something that I'm keen to, if I was half the dad he was, I would have been. I'd be very proud.
Do you feel a pressure with the expectation to live up to the way you look at your dad?
Possibly, yeah. I think that, as I say, because he was such a big sort of role model in that sense, of course, everything I do, I try to be the same for my kids. But yeah, he ingrained some true values in us that we aim to replicate, and there's certainly a pressure to deliver that. But I think I take that role as a father seriously. It's something that I'm very active within when I'm home anyway. And yeah, as I say, it goes back to that purpose.
A lot of people, as you mentioned, and it's very unfortunate way of the world today, but a lot of people don't have that. Not even just a good father role model. Some of them have a bad father role model. Some of them don't even have a father around them at all. What impact do you think that has on the football pitch for players? And can you notice it in the players?
It's probably not so much on the pitch, it's maybe off it. I've seen some extremely talented lads that could have the world at their feet, and probably because they don't have certain influences in their life can be led astray. I mentioned earlier on about big characters and being surrounded by them and trying to shape them, and if you've not got someone that has your best interests at heart, you can stray. There are a lot of influences within football, clingers on in many ways, because players have got access to money that they would never ever could even fathom at the age that they are, and ultimately it brings out people that probably they're not best for you. But to try and step away from that when it's maybe all you've known and the people that maybe you looked up to for the right or wrong reason, it's difficult to move away from that. But naturally, to have a father or mother figure, but just big characters that have your interest at heart, I think is really important.
The sport has changed. I think everyone can see this, but the sport has changed dramatically over the past probably 20 to 40 year range because of the amount of money that's gone into the game and this sort of thing. And you see the player that gets into the game, gets the money, and then their mindset goes. And I saw this interesting study to do with extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. And when the extrinsic motivation starts to grow larger than the intrinsic motivation, which is the thing that got them there in the first place, that intrinsic motivation just depletes. It just goes. And they're just carried by extrinsic motivation, which is, the fame, the money, all this sort of thing. How do you keep yourself in check with, dealing with the positive rewards and aspects of being a pro footballer, but it could also, harm you in the long run? How do you keep yourself in check with that?
It's difficult. I've seen it firsthand how being surrounded, football is very much keeping up with the Joneses mentality at times, and you've got players that have got abundance of talent but can lack self-confidence, and ultimately the materialistic things that they seek are purely to fill that void. But it's probably, I keep banging on about it, it's having those people that surround yourself that they aren't yes men. They're questioning, what are you doing that for? Why are you trying to compete with those same people that could be 3, 4, 5 years down the line from you? And I think that goes for every walk of life. If you've got those people to challenge you, it does make that a lot easier. But in football, it's tough because you have abundance of money in a short period of time. There's an expectation from fans, from family, from friends to drive a certain car, have a certain house, because that's what footballers do. And I think it's quite easy to fall into the trap. If you're the lone sheep that decides that, no, I'm not getting involved in that, you can, I'd say, ostracize, but it takes big character, and a lot of the time it comes probably from a level of experience to be able to go, no, maybe I don't need to spend £1,000, £1,500 a month on a new car when the car that I had is perfectly capable. But to tell an 18-year-old, I think you have to go through that period. I mean, I'd like to think now that that's probably where my mindset is, but when I was 21, 22 years old and I had access to Mercedes, big GLEs and stuff like this, I was impressionable, and I did feel like, oh yeah, that's perfect. This is something that I'd always aspired for, and I now had access to it. So you do have to go through it and realize that maybe you made mistakes and you learn from them. And I don't think, from me reflecting on it and speaking to young lads of today and saying this is pointless, it's a waste of money, once that novelty wears off, which it will in 2-3 weeks time, you'll start to resent that decision. unfortunately, I think it can kind of go in one ear and out the other.
Who was your hero in footballing as a childhood? Yeah, as a child.
Um, it's a good question. I'm asked this a lot, and like stereotypically, you look at the flasher players, um, the Ronaldinhos, those sorts of players. I was a right back, and I know Jamie Carragher said in his sort of Monday Night Football, no one ever wanted to grow up and be a Gary Neville. But strangely, as I've got older, I really sort of inspired by what Gary Neville's not only done on the pitch but off it. As I leave football, I want to go down the sort of entrepreneurial route. It's something that we're sort of putting in place at the moment in time. But ultimately, when I look at what he's done, what he's achieved since leaving football, and using maybe the platform that he had in football to bridge to what he's able to achieve now, that certainly inspires me. So although it's not the most popular of options in that sense, yeah, I think he was definitely an inspiration.
If you could speak to the parents of academy kids, what would you say to them?
This is something that I battle with a lot because I watch a lot of grassroots football, child's in those sorts of environments, and I see that the pressure that parents at times can put on those children. Kids travelling an hour and a half to this academy on one day, and then an hour the next day to another academy, and by this 12, 13, 14, this kid's burnt out. Whilst they're young, whilst they're even in the academy, just allow the kids to enjoy themselves. Of course, you want to foster that hard work and those characteristics that we spoke about at the start as to what you need to get to that level. But ultimately, it comes down to whether or not a kid's going to enjoy it. Because if he's not enjoying it, he's not going to be prepared to stay out, do the extra reps, do the stuff that is required to get you there. So by overanalyzing, by enforcing too much on those kids, I think it can take away a little bit of the love at times. And I know that's difficult because ultimately the kid wants to achieve it. The parents think that they've got his best interest at heart, but by putting too much pressure on them in an already pressured situation, which is the academy, I do think it can get too much at times.
I guess you kind of have to, because it's all extrinsic motivation, isn't it? The forcing your kid to do something, the kid's just doing it to please his parents at the end of the day, not please his own or her own wishes. You kind of have to cultivate that intrinsic motivation within the kid. If football isn't their purpose, how would you advise a parent to help their kid find their own purpose?
I think it's exposure to lots of different things. I always talk about stepping out your comfort zone, but going into new environments and just assessing and understanding like whether that works for you. It's where we grow the most. Is those so putting them into different clubs, different environments, so that they have to thrive. And ultimately, listen, I've been fortunate in that this was my dream, and we've gone down that path. But with my son, for example, there'll be exposure to so many different routes, avenues, and education, for example, will be the front and center, because I think that's a huge driver, regardless of how well he's doing. It goes back to what I was saying about my dad, and it was something that was ingrained in me. I had to attend college of an evening, even during my scholarship, because football can change in an instant. But yeah, it's just that exposure to new environments and see what they thrive in.
As mentioned at the beginning, the statistics of the amount of players that actually make it pro from being in the academy as a youth is very, very slim. Have you seen players lose themselves after not getting that pro contract, and has that taught you anything?
Yeah, certainly. As I said, there's been a lot of very, very good players that were capable of achieving some serious heights, and one or two setbacks, an injury here or there, and it completely derails them. So for me, the learnings from that is being able to, how do you stay focused, how do you stay mentally robust enough that you can take those setbacks on the chin. But unfortunately, football is that it's a ruthless industry, and if you can be flying one minute and facing real setback the next, and it's how you adjust and cope with that will shape the direction of travel for you.
It's about overcoming the obstacles that just pop up when you don't expect them, and keeping your head straight when everything's going well for you.
Exactly that.
What does it feel like to progress in the football industry?
Yeah, I think naturally it's an incredible feeling to go up and play in stadiums that maybe you'd seen on TV, you've grown up watching, playing against players that you idolise as kids. They're incredible moments, and there's something you hang on to dearly because, as I say, they're few and far between. For me, I was always put on the sort of the epitome for me was going and playing in the Premier League. I wasn't able to achieve that, so the next best was then playing in the Championship. And to achieve that dream, I remember the moment we were promoted, and it was accumulation of 25, 26 years of hard work and effort for that short moment of real pleasure and euphoria. But I guess it's those little moments that you cling on to for dear life.
The present moment of actually achieving the goal, does it reach your expectation?
It does in that split second, but the moment the final whistle was blew and everyone rushed onto the pitch and you knew you were promoted, or scoring that goal at Wembley and everyone's going crazy in the crowd, but that only lasts for such a short window, and then you kind of have to get your head back on it, and you're sort of back in into the game, and it's a strange feeling because you put it on the pedestal for so long and you're chasing it, and then you kind of have a short moment to appreciate it, and then it moves on. And I guess that is football. It's just it's the sort of thread that's run throughout this. It's very brief, that's for sure.
When you make a goal reality, I guess you have to look for the next goal so that you can start moving to something. Otherwise, I feel like there's no meaning in anything. If you're not moving towards something, there's no meaning in anything. What was that like for you then? Like, touch on that. When you'd been promoted and you start again, what's that feeling like in professional football?
Yeah, it's really peculiar in many ways. I was only listening to Gareth Southgate today talk about losing in the final against Spain, and then very quickly the next day he's cleaning up his dog sick. Like, it just shows you that unfortunately it is just so sort of very short-lived in many ways. It's why a lot of people struggle after marathons, because they put the goal on the pedestal, they complete a marathon, and then they feel like there's no purpose thereafter. Following promotion, we were promoted during COVID, so we couldn't really even celebrate with the fans. You build up this picture in your head that that's ultimately what you're going to do. You're going to be in the crowd, you're going to be crowd surf and all these wild sort of emotions, and then you go to Vegas and celebrate out there, and none of that actually materialized simply because of COVID. So I wouldn't say it falls flat, but I remember the days following when you're like, right, I've now got to sort out my contract, because I'm actually I'm actually not contracted to the club for the next season. It does feel strange, and that's why it's actually the journey rather than reaching the ultimate goal. I think it's the journey that you have to savor, because I think that's probably where you get the most satisfaction from.
Do you think as you said, the journey, do you think there's like you have the main objective goals, and then you have, micro aims? Do you think the achievement of those micro aims is what keeps you going?
Absolutely.
And you achieve those and you look for the next micro aim, and it all leads up to the objective. How important did you do that yourself as a player going through the ranks?
Subconsciously, I don't ever think I was like, right, do this, then do that. I had the ultimate aim of being a pro or reaching the Premier League or whatnot, but within those, you were kind of, let's make my debut. Let's, I don't know, become a regular within the team. And you just do that subconsciously. It wasn't something that at the start of the season, this is my aim. You're on that journey and you're just ticking it off. But you are right. You have to celebrate those small wins, because reaching that ultimate is an accumulation of those small wins along the way.
You mentioned that quite a few times you've had injuries and you felt like that's, brought you down a little bit. It's one of the lows of football is injuries. In those times where maybe you haven't been as physically active because you're injured, have you noticed a difference in not just your physical health, but your mental health too?
Yeah, and that was a big reason why I started to sort of study away from football. When I left Portsmouth, I felt, I said, that window of not knowing what club I was going to, I felt vulnerable. And I went back to uni and I did a master's in sports directorship, and having that to really focus on away from the pitch really opened my eyes. I felt like I was taking, in football you feel like you're at the beck and call of a manager, sporting director, whoever it is that's is calling the shots, and by going and doing a qualification and getting something behind you to fall back on, I think it felt as though I was taking back a little bit of that control. So that's been my kind of remit throughout, even after I finished that master's, is like, right, let's network. Let's make sure that once you finish, you can sort of end on your own terms and you're in the strongest possible position to transition into something else.
So you're looking to transition into business?
Yes, exactly that.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So we're currently we sort of launched a couple of months ago now, but we're soon sort of raising because we look to acquire, invest in sports-related SMEs, sort of co-founders from a management consulting background, and the team that we've got, they have the sort of operational expertise to help these SMEs grow. And then we're sort of working with athletes, and their distribution and opening of doors enables those SMEs within sports to really blossom and grow, and we call it hyperscale. So that's ultimately the aim. It's a work in progress and very much at the start of that journey, but it's enabled me to step into sort of rooms with founders, with CEOs, with hedge fund managers, and people that I've had access to, but not really known anything about. And it's really opened my eyes, and it felt as though I've certainly grown an awful lot over those last probably year and a half.
Would you say there's a lot of the mindset that you've adopted for being a professional footballer also applies to your business life as well?
Absolutely. It's something I bang on to the players about a lot. There's a huge amount of transferable skills that they have. They just kind of need an opportunity to express them. And I just don't think that they know they're capable of stepping into those. But we talk about distribution, the contacts that they've built throughout football. There's a huge amount of businesses out there that are desperate for those contacts, those warm leads. And even if they don't want to put themselves in a position where they're standing up in front of executives and doing pitch decks or whatnot, they can offer opportunities for those SMEs to step into that space with warm connections. And yeah, it's my job at the moment in time to really sort of shout that message from the rooftops so that athletes feel that once they come out of football, they can step into something new.
Yeah. Would you ever be interested in being part of the football management squad?
Strangely, I did my UEFA B coaching badges, and I always said no and I won't do it. And it was probably more to be a support to my brother at the time. He was doing his badges as well, and I felt as though just being a sort of helping hand in many ways. Actually, whilst I was doing it, I did enjoy it, but it goes back. After 18 years, I'm not entirely sure I want to be confined to the fixture schedule anymore. The fickleness of football and how unsecure that job role is. I think I've got a family there. I'm a planner. I like to know what comes next. And I don't think you can ever do that in management, football management.
Next day you can be out the door, right?
Exactly.
We've seen it a lot recently as well. Exactly that. Certain clubs.
The hire and firing sort of is become even more intense now, and I'm not entirely sure after, as I say, an 18-year career, I want to remain in that, which is strange because, as I say, I did a sporting directorship. I felt as though that was probably my next step to go into some sort of back office within a football club. But yeah, who knows?
What positive and what negative things do you think that the pumping of money into football has done to the game?
It's probably raised the quality of football. You look at the players that Premier League teams have access to now, they can go and acquire any player in the world. But ultimately, the knock-on impact that has is that for our homegrown players, they're now not only competing about the best in the UK, it's the best worldwide. And they're having to go and seek first team football at times elsewhere. Now, the impact that's had on the England squad, for example, probably you look at it now and go, well, they're one of the favourites for the World Cup. So it can't be that much of a detrimental impact. But if you look within the academies, there's so many players that are housed within these. You're talking 50, 60 players within academy setups now, like within the youth team 21s, which is a huge amount of players that ultimately won't ever end up a professional. And I've seen the impact that can have, and at times that's not pretty.
You think it's made high-level football less accessible to the majority of people?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
Listen, it's a competition, and as I said, it's dog eat dog within football. There's always someone sort of vying for your place and your position. But ultimately, those homegrown lads that have been at that academy since 8 years old, it doesn't make that it makes their journey a hell of a lot harder. And when they are released, because they are now competing against every player all over the world. Yeah, I think that becomes tough, and there's probably more that can be done and should be done to help that sort of offboarding process.
Interesting question here, but obviously, football's changed mass amounts over the years, and it's changing quicker and quicker and quicker. We've seen, VAR introduced, and the loss of jobs to do with football behind the scenes being replaced by, more jobs in one, or like even robots and stuff like that. Where can you see the future of football going?
It's scary. AI does scare me, although I love some of the benefits of it. Naturally, when you automate all these different processes, something has to give. You're seeing the rise of stuff like Baller League. There is definitely a shift in the generation. Generationally now, I look at my son, and he's not so fixated on a football team as such. It's definitely more individuals. So those Ronaldos, those Messis, people follow them and the team that they provide. How many shirts are Van der Sar sold nowadays? No one ever heard of them before. So there's definitely an impact on that, and the shorter form of the game. So as I say, Baller League and these sort of more content creators sort of spaces are where it's going slightly. It's the next sort of 10-15 years is going to be interesting, because I don't know if the same appetite for the long form of the game, where it's how we see it today and how we've always seen it, is still going to be the same. It'll be interesting, that's for sure.
That really interests me, because we've seen a transition from the content that people are consuming in general. I mean, the majority of people now consume on Instagram and TikTok rather than YouTube, because our attention spans have shortened.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be really interesting to see that happen with football. It's always been the 90-minute game. What's this Baller League about?
So I was only speaking to the lawyer around it yesterday. Again, it's like an indoor 5 or 6-a-side sort of tournament where you've got content creators, ex-pros, players all coming from different sort of backgrounds in that sense, and coming together in a competitive sort of format. But it's a lot shorter, it's indoor, it's high energy. You've got, as soon as anyone scores, you've got all the cameramen running on the pitch, and I think it just encapsulates that audience that we're talking about. And that's why when you then go and stretch that over 90 minutes, where ball in play is only at 45 minutes of a 90-minute game, you probably lose some of that audience, that younger generation that have been used to seeing everything on a phone, highlight reels, and expecting to see that things on demand. So it's, as I say, it's football's at an interesting tipping point in that sense, and the next few years will be, eye-opening for sure.
Do you think it's something that, because, all the jobs that people think of getting into now, I think everyone is kind of clouded by the worry about, like you said, you're frightened of AI. Loads of people are frightened of AI, and I know a lot of people that are my age too look forward and think, what do I want to do? Well, that's going to be replaced by AI, so I can't do that. Do you think football will be impacted?
Certain aspects of it I will. I mean, your question whether or not we're automating offsides, we're automating the sort of decision making of the game. So in due course, is there going to be need for a referee? Is there going to need so it's difficult to say from now, and but I think when you look in 5-10 years time, the game is constantly evolving. There's people in Switzerland that we had the referees meeting, and they said UEFA are working on this and this, and so the game has to evolve, and if it doesn't, it becomes stagnant, and the next generation are going to just demand change in many ways, which I don't know what that looks like at the moment in time, but when you've got the capability of what AI has, and that's its probably earliest form right now, that next 10 years could be very, very different.
As football's evolved, and each club has become more and more of its own business, and the league itself, leagues have become their own businesses too. We've seen the introduction of VAR. VAR, interestingly, is more of I think it's more of a system to make sure there's a fairness between the battle of the businesses in a way. If a goal was given unfairly and it costs one team a win, they get less money from it. So there's kind of these VAR seems to have been put in place that for the sake of the fairness for the businesses. Do you think that the more strict football's becoming with the rules, like the automation of offsides and goal line technology and stuff, do you reckon that taking away of the novelty of error in the game takes away the fun too?
I don't know, because it wasn't very fun when Frank Lampard's goal went in at the World Cup and we all thought it was in, and it clearly was in, and it wasn't given. So I think when it wasn't in place, everyone was shouting for it, and now it is in place, it's kind of like, well, actually, we want to go back to what it used to be like.
Grass is always greener.
This is it. I do think the game has changed. We don't use it here. VAR is not sort of implemented as you come down the leagues. I think if they speed it up, they're trying to communicate a little bit more and make it more of so the fans are engaged in it with the way the referees speak to the crowd. The biggest issue, no, I don't think anyone can really complain. If we're taking error out of the game, then there shouldn't be any argument for that. But ultimately, we're constantly trying to speed the game up. I mentioned there about ball in play. If it's taking 3-4 minutes to make a decision, then no one's enjoying that. And ultimately, if they can just make things a lot quicker and get to that decision a lot sooner, then realistically, I can't see why anyone can argue with it.
To wrap up, I wanna start a new thing. I want to ask my guest one question. What is one line you would give to your younger self?
Good question.
No rush.
Be prepared to step outside your comfort zone more often.
Why?
Because that's where we grow the most. The zone of proximal development. It's something I embraced at 27 years old, and I talk about footballers being in a privileged position in that we've got access to some incredible people. People want to work with elite athletes simply because of the job role, and I was possibly naive to that throughout my career. I wasted a huge amount of time where I could have been benefiting from the information that they had and just being a sponge around those sorts of people. If I was to look back, it's something that I speak to the younger generation about now, is that it's where you grow. If you're looking for that purpose, step into those uncomfortable situations and see.
Where ability meets challenge +1, right? So you can handle the task and it's not too big so that you fail. You're more likely to succeed, but it's something that pushes you, right?
Exactly that.
Nathan, thank you very much.
Pleasure.